Hello, everybody, and welcome to the March Sports Biz Sunday Roundup. If you are thinking it's only been a week or so since the February one, well, you'll be correct. But we are trying to get back into more of a proper rhythm with these and trying to tackle off our monthly roundups at the beginning of the following month. So it is myself, Simon, and very pleased to be joined by Mo today. No CJ, unfortunately, he's enjoying himself in Greece, but we have five fantastic visualizations to talk you through today. So we'll kick things straight off with a pick that actually came from both myself and Mo, which is this fitness tracker by Lila Raztik. And I love this one. It just looks like something that will come out of one of those fitness app type dashboards, like a Whoop or maybe an Apple Watch. And the way it's been laid out, the way it's been designed, so many nice elements. But actually, probably more importantly than that for me is just the personalization that Lila has added to this with some of these wonderful titles. Heart of the Warrior in the top right, for example, tracking moderate activity, morning ritual, making sure that they start with that 15 minutes of yoga. So lots of interesting Tableau visualization designs in here, but I just love the personal feel to this and some of those fantastic headlines that have been added for each of the sections.
Yeah, it's really clever. It brings together so many different types of visualization, but the constant theming and then the title. And I particularly love the subtitles telling you the daily goal. It's telling you the point and the message of each graph. So you get an overall view of what's going on with the title, you get that personalization, and then you get that interpretation of actually what are you supposed to be looking for when you look at this. And I just think it ties itself together so well and looks absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, and when you look at actually the flow chart or the stream graph and the habit forge, it's the amount and array of activities
Yeah,
that Lila does. I mean, that puts a lot of people to shame. I can probably put down one, maybe two that I do relatively regularly. But yeah,
yeah,
this six independent activities, fantastic, really inspiring to see.
definitely.
Okay, moving on to this was a design that came through on LinkedIn, but I believe also is in or certainly made in Tableau by good friend and regular contributor Matthias, looking at the Formula One telemetry, but cleverly animating it onto a Formula One steering wheel. And as you look through here, you'll see, okay, yeah, the yellow bars going up for throttle and the green bars for brake is going up and down as well. Clever as it is, but it's really when you start to get into it properly and explore the telemetry on the map that you really get a sense of how fantastic this is, because it is all correlated real time. So when the dot comes up to a corner on the map, you see the brake coming up, the throttle going down, you see the speed changing, the kilometers per hour, the gear as well. Everything is related and tied in. So it's really a fantastic piece of work there, and just one that actually I dare you to stop watching because it is very, very addictive.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And animations are such an underused feature of Tableau. We're used to seeing it just flip between kind of one graph type and another graph type, or bars shrink and grow and dots move about as people move through years or something. That classic kind of Hans Rosling GDP example springs to mind. But I love this
Mm.
idea, and I think there's really something in this that speaks to like the animations being a completely untapped area of doing a very different type of visualization in Tableau. Something that is much more through time, much more engaging, much more interactive, but you can still stop at any moment and engage with it to find out a bit more detail. So yeah, I think it's just a really great example of something a bit new.
Yeah, definitely. And animations, I often see them being used in like progressions of line charts, or like you mentioned Hans Rosling there, Mo, like the bubble chart
Mm.
type views. But something like this just feels a very different use case for it, but one that, like you say, is relatively untried and untested. I think the only thing that would take you to the next level if the steering wheel could also be turned depending on where the corner was coming up and that sort of thing, to see the kind of steering lock angles that they have. Then, of course, I suppose you need to then change the geometry of each of the bars as well. So an interesting challenge, but that would be pretty cool. Maybe one for you, Mo.
Yeah, I'm up for that. I've done a fair bit of that with the Paris GB when there was a lot of 3D translation of points going on there.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. All right, let's move swiftly on. Thank you very much for that, Matthias. And now we come to a design that's been created in Flourish. So just to remind people, we're not necessarily 100% tied to Tableau. We generally see the majority of designs coming through from Tableau because Mo, CJ, and myself have spent a lot of time in Tableau, as have previous members of the Sports with Sunday team. But certainly we are very much tool agnostic from this perspective. And so we encourage any types of visualizations in any tool to come through with the Sports with Sunday hashtag. And this one is a particular special one because it's this person's first Sports with Sunday entry, Joseph Whitcomb, in collaboration with Scott Barber from Flourish. I've met Scott before and he's a great guy. And this is looking at Newcastle's, I guess, redemption after 70 years of being trophyless in the recent Carabao Cup final. And what I love about this, it gives you a lot of detail, but actually the key points are very easy to find. You can find very quickly the last trophy that they won with that star on the left-hand side, the FA Cup. And then you go all the way across all these years of pain and hurt to that last star in the top right there, that Carabao Cup triumph. But again, if you want to go to the next level of detail, you can see additional stories where they came close, where they were runners up. And you can see that a number of times with that lighter grey, slightly smaller circle. But they have had success as well. There's a number of stars in the Championship, the First Division as old, which really gives you a sense that they've been a little bit bouncing up and down between the Premier League and the lower divisions as well. So much in here, nicely put together. And thank you very much, Joseph, for sharing your first visualization with us.
Yeah, definitely. What a triumph of visualization. Like you said, Sai, it's brilliant. The story is great. It's really well executed. And I love the difference in size between the big trophy stars and the little championship winning stars in the bottom viz. There's just something really lovely about that sense of scale without diminishing the achievement, I think.
Definitely, yeah. And again, I'll always like to call these things out the link of words and color. One of my favorite things to point out at work, and so I'll do it in my personal life as well. The fact we've got that trophy in that yellow just instantly links me to those two stars as well. So yeah, really great job all round. Fantastic. Mo, I'm going to turn things over to you now because you've got a couple that you pulled out from his archive. Do you want to take us through this first one here from Mark?
Yeah. So this first one from Mark is looking at the tracks from the 2025 Formula One season and all the different circuits. And it's very, very simple, but it's incredibly striking, which I really like, which is that it really highlights these kind of track layouts in red. And you get a little bit of extra detail about the track with the text. You get a little bit about the number of laps, the distance, if you're interested. But there's something great about being able to see the shapes so starkly, but also see the environments that they're in. You can look at something and understand whether it's actually on the coast or whether it's kind of in more of a built-up area or whether it seems to be slightly apart from other things that are going on, and how those choices of location might have also started to dictate the layout of the track and why some of the features on it are kind of the position or the shape that they are. And I just really enjoy looking at it. It's almost abstract because of the contrast between the two colors, but I think it carries more meaning rather than less because of that.
Yeah, definitely. And to the point about color there, Mo, it is the classic F1 palette, isn't it? That red and black. So you don't even really need to look at it. And you can always squint and you would still give a good guess and that this is going to be a Formula One related viz. So yeah, I love it. I love the different track layouts. As someone, I'm a bit of a F1 fan. So just scanning through some of these, there are so many that instantly jump out as being ones that I've either seen on TV and the commentators doing their high level intro to the race, showing the track dimensions and layout. Oh, yes, I recognize that one. But also when you play games on the Xbox, PlayStation, you get that same feeling of that layout, and you can just begin to it feels like something that's memorable and sparks a nice memory of enjoyable moments from the past. I particularly like some of the speedier tracks. Monza, for example, you can see why that's called the Temple of Speed. Is essentially just a few straights and a couple of corners just to join them all up. And you can really get a sense of where some of the more trickier circuits might begin to come into play. If you look at Monaco, for example, well, first of all, you can see how tight that is. Not a surprise given it's actually going through the middle of a city. So some really great views there come out as you explore each of them. So yeah, great pick, Mo.
Yeah, it's a good one. And then this is my other one. So this is Chris Westlake in the middle of his rugby era. and this is his Calcutta Cup. So looking at the rivalry and the matches between England and Scotland. And I'm obviously on a bit of a colour mission this time around, because what really struck me about this one was the colour, and particularly the use of like negative and positive space in both directions. So we're kind of, you do see visualizations where negative space, so that white space, is being used to indicate something rather than just kind of color in a separate standalone graph on a white background. And what I really like here is that the white and the blue, depending on whether you're looking up or look down, alternate on being the negative space or the positive space, depending on kind of how you're looking at it. And I just think that's a really clever way of portraying this. And it makes it very, very easy to see the different trends that you're talking about. So you can see in the recent years, those really tall white spikes showing, the relative dominance of England and the big victories there, and how a little bit before that, it was Scotland's turn to have some big victories. But actually, you can also see the growth in the size of the victory, compared to the very first international rugby match way back at the beginning. So there's just a lot in here, and it's been done with two very simple colors and what is a bar chart, a very simple bar chart at its heart, but yet it combines to create something that kind of feels much, much more than just the sum of its parts.
Yeah, in one way, it gives hope for us all, I think, Mo, because as you say, it is a simple bar chart, but the skill isn't necessarily in the chart choice. It's all the other aspects that you mentioned, and just by putting a bar chart into a Tableau dashboard doesn't necessarily make it a good visual. So there's so many other aspects that Chris has done well here.
Yeah.
You are right though, Mo. I do wonder whether I'm no rugby fan or rugby expert, bit of a fan, not so much an expert. Do wonder whether the scoring system changed. They do seem very low scoring matches. Don't know whether that's the thing, but
Yeah.
certainly
So
if anyone does know, please let us
I
know.
believe that it came from way back when you scored a try, what you won was the opportunity to have a go at scoring a point,
Ah, okay.
which is why it
Interesting.
was called a try. So you won a try, and
Ah,
then
an
you got a
effort,
point
if
for,
you like, an
for
effort, a
yes, you
goal.
won an
Yeah,
effort.
okay.
Yeah.
Ah, there we go.
Which I think might have been a kick between the posts, but I'm not sure about that one. Happy to be fact checked by any of our rugby listeners. Yeah, and then they changed that to being something different. I once
Heads.
saw a guy talking about how you could make rugby a more competitive game, or rugby union, a more internationally competitive game, if you thought about switching back to something similar to those kind of initial rule sets, which, I mean, up to you whether you think it needs to be more or less competitive. I would say this was 7 or 8 years ago. I would say right now it's in pretty good health. But
Interesting. Yeah. And that brings back memories of a debate that we had, didn't we, between and CJ as well, I think, around football and the points differential being so small is one of the reasons why it makes it such a compelling and engaging sport around the world. Whereas if you do get these bigger points differences and point opportunities, it can spread things out. Same with American football. I think that's where it came up actually. Uh, the the
yeah, it was.
Super Bowl. The other thing I was going to point out here, and again, this is a compliment to Chris, is without even really looking at it, you kind of know it's a Chris Westlake design because of the
Yeah.
style of the. I mean, in this case, this very much reminds me of the recent one that Chris did on Warren Gatlin and the Wales. What do you call it? Tribulations that the Welsh team have had over the past few years and being top of the rankings and then falling all the way down. I remember very, very well that sort of really insightful annotation before we got into the main visualization below. So it's a really consistent style, but a very effective one as well.
Yeah, it is. And he has actually produced a blog post kind of talking about where all of these different rugby ones have come from and a bit of why, which I had a quick skim through earlier, and looked like it'd be a really inspiring read, especially for anyone out there who's thinking about how do I get started, where do I go, how do I get involved, or kind of I want to have a go, but I don't think I'm good enough, kind of all of those things. It's a great place to have a read and hopefully reassure yourself that you belong here as much as anyone else does.
Yeah, there's always a place for everyone, and like we tend to show, or not in all cases, but a lot of the visualizations are relatively straightforward to create. There's design aspects that we talked about there, but certainly it's not always huge amounts of scaffolding and geometry and those sorts of things. You can get a very compelling view with pretty simple graph types as well. So never too early or too late to start. Okay, Mo, that is our 5. That felt very quick, but hopefully
Mm.
those listening have had a good chance to enjoy our favorites from February, from March even. And we will be back in a month or so to review April. So do keep those visualizations coming. Use the hashtag SportsVisSunday for us to pick them up in the easiest way. But we're always checking out the desks of X and LinkedIn to see any sporting visualizations that do come across there as well. So in the meantime, thank you very much for listening and look forward to seeing you all again next month. Bye bye.
Thank you very much.